Good evening all, and welcome. I mentioned it a few days ago, and I'm mentioning it again. The book True Darkness, written by two members of the awesome community, is launching on the 19th. It's going to be epic. You can check out the website in the description. I know I forgot it last time, but it's in there this time, so please have a look. Launches on the 19th. It would really mean a lot if you guys would check it out when it's launched. But for now, it's time to get comfortable. Make sure there's no one behind you, and let the darkness take control. It was late spring in my 7th year of school. It was a rough school in a sketchy area. I was in the 3rd year of my middle school, crafting a magnet program to better integrate the classes, and the enrollment for the program was small. Even smaller numbers for female, so making female friends in an isolated environment as this was difficult at best. That's when I met Sabrina. She was non-magnet, and wanted to have me and her friend Kylie spend the night, so I was thrilled. She lived in an apartment with her mother and brother that was across from a racetrack and a bar. Super sketchy area. Her mother sold handmade keychains at the flea market each weekend. This is important later. Things get weird about the time we get pizza and movies. Her mother was a little odd and hung out the whole time. Like, she was a 13-year-old girl and regularly going into her room and calling Sabrina. We couldn't ask what was up because her mum was always there, and this was the age of pages. So around 9 p.m. she goes to bed. To our dismay, 10 minutes later, she's calling Sabrina to come to bed too. She was actually going to stay with her mum at her own sleepover, so left with a few pillows that had seen better days and no blankets, Kylie and I were going to have a sleepover to ourselves. We start the movie back up, and suddenly Sabrina comes out to get the phone. As she is about to go back into the room, she whispers, "Don't stay up late. We have to go to work at the flea market tomorrow and leave at 5:30. I guess she saw our faces and she giggles this creepy giggle and adds, "You didn't think the pizza was for free, did you?" Then she goes into the room and locks the door. Kylie, who I had just met this evening, and I exchanged glances. This was the first we heard about this. We were never even asked. After a short conversation, we decided we wanted to go home. Our parents were more likely to be awake now than they would at 5:30 in the morning. So we knock on the bedroom door, to no answer. We try and try, but nothing. There's no way they're asleep that fast. So I go to the kitchen to see if there's another phone. Nope. They locked us in the living room of this one-bedroom apartment with no phone and no restroom, and now they weren't responding at all. This is where the young and dumb formulate a plan. We know school isn't very far away, and Kylie says she lives near school, so we decide to find a payphone or walk to her house. How bad could it be? Biggest mistake of our lives. We try knocking one last time to the same result, so we gather our belongings and leave. How the world outside changed after 10 p.m. The bar a stone's throw away from the apartment was jumping. We go up to the payphone that's near the street and close to the rear of the bar. It's broken. As I put down the receiver, some burly, drunk man rounds the corner towards us. We were two 13-year-olds that could have passed for 17 easily. Neither of us were dressed showing much skin, but Mr. Drunk Dude liked what he saw. First he yelled if we wanted a party, or if he could buy us drinks. "No thanks," we replied, and started to walk in the direction of her home. This only infuriated him, as he's now yelling that we're skanks and nobody turns their back on him. We keep on. He starts to stumble after us, and catches Kylie by the wrist. She's trying to shake him off to no avail, and he's telling us what he's going to do to us. We're getting terrified because she can't break the hold and he won't let go. That's when Kylie lands a shot into his crown jewels. We take off running, but the shot must have sobered him up, and he's angrier in pursuit. We scan the area. There's no place to hide, no place to get help, and we're now not trusting if we saw anyone that would help us. We run loops around the apartment Sabrina lived in, but somehow one of Mr. Drunk's friends had joined in. We knew they were behind us, and that they are alienating, tailing us, and the yelling to his friends, saying that there's one for each of us. So, to not let us get away. Now we know we're trapped, so we book it up some random metal stairs. We hit the second floor, are banging doors, but nobody is opening them. Luckily, we find an open door at the end, and we think we're in the clear. But then we hear constant clanking and one of them is coming up, but the stairs have no second floor visibility. We dash into the room only to see it's a laundry room, with no door to lock. We start wedging ourselves behind the machines, praying and hoping we're not found, because he's now on the second floor and heading our way. It goes quiet, except music and voices from the bar. He didn't leave, I think. I didn't hear the stairs. That's when the aroma of smoke and alcohol descends upon the heavy air. He's in the door listening, and then he speaks. I know you're in there, girls. There's nowhere for you to go. If you come out now, I'll forgive the one that kicked my nuts and go easy on you both. Come on out. After a moment, he spoke again. His mood flipped. Okay, I'm gonna yank you out by your hair and rough it up. I'd like to say that someone overheard all of this and intervened, but they didn't. After what seemed like an eternity, he stood there for 10 minutes. We heard him descend the stairs, and we were hiding an additional 15 minutes before checking to see if it was safe to leave. Long story short, we made it to Kylie's house, which was not as close as she said, but we had our lives. My father came to get me after midnight. The next morning, Sabrina's mother called and feigned cluelessness as to why we would leave, claiming we didn't knock, lied about taking the phone, and thought it was normal to make her daughter's friends have to work for free. Sabrina and I didn't speak much after Kylie's parents believed all of Sabrina's mother's nonsense and grounded her for a month. This was a long time ago, but it has stayed haunting me since. This happened when I was a lot younger, and sometimes I still think about it. At the time, I was around 10 years old, going to school in Osaka, Japan. I lived in America, but every summer my mum would take my younger sister and I to Japan to see her mother and make us go to school, since Japanese schools go on until late July before their summer break. In the mornings, I would walk to school with my sister, and everything was usually okay. Although we'd get the occasional odd stare, since despite being half Japanese, in a smaller town like that, where no tourists ever come, we stuck out like a sore thumb. However, once school was over, I usually was unable to walk home with my sister because of after-school clubs and the clubs ending at different times. At least, I had a few friends who could walk me home, however, and gave me company, so I rarely was ever alone. But one day, I decided I didn't want to stay for my club, and that I just wanted to go home early and play some Wii. I knew my mum wouldn't mind, since I had decided to join a not-too-important club called Cooking Club. My friends, however, had more obligation than I did since they actually lived in Japan and went for the whole school year, unlike me, and could not accompany me home. My walk home started out fine, but rather quickly my 10-year-old self felt that something was off. There was a man in a baseball cap, wearing one of those cold masks, with baggy clothes following me. He was still a fair distance away from me too, so since I was a pretty naive kid, I shrugged it off and kept walking. But pretty soon after, I heard footsteps pretty close behind me now. I figured it was a different person, but being curious, I turned my head to see the same man closing the distance between us fairly quickly. I remember starting to feel pretty nervous at that point. A quick point here before I continue. In the town I was at, there are lots of small alleys and streets that are all connected, so you can take plenty of wrong turns and still end up home as long as you have a decent idea of where your house is. My brain does not function well at all when I'm nervous or stressed, so instinctively I turned into a small alleyway, which was honestly the dumbest thing I could have done. But at the time I figured that the man would keep walking and that would resolve all of this. But instead, he turned into the alleyway as well. At this point I started fast walking, but didn't want to straight up run since I still wasn't 100% sure he was following me, and running would come off as kind of rude if the man wasn't following me. I began making random turns into streets and narrow alleys that I had never stepped foot into before, hoping that the man wouldn't follow me. Surely he was just an innocent man trying to get somewhere. However, even my dumb 10-year-old brain knew that after the 5th or 6th time I had made a random turn with the man still following me, that I was in danger. At the time, I was in a narrow alleyway with walls that were way taller than I was, so I couldn't see what was up ahead or next to me. I decided I should start running, not thinking that a grown man would be faster than me. I also was weighed down by my backpack and water bottle, so I can only imagine how slow I was. I could hear his footsteps much louder against the asphalt, and I was beyond scared at this point. I was sure I was going to get kidnapped and then murdered. I remember running with everything I had, to the point I was afraid I would literally run myself into the ground. But the alleyway went out into a street I recognized, where there was a supermarket, and thankfully several people were either walking or on their bicycles. I slowed down immediately. I was a self-conscious kid, and didn't want to attract more attention to myself than my foreign looks already were. I turned around once more to see the man who was simply standing there for a few moments before walking in the direction of the supermarket. But I knew there was no way that was his destination this whole time. I had taken the weirdest route, and there were much more direct ways he could have used if he had wanted to go there. I told my mum, who contacted the school. I got in trouble for deciding to go home alone that day, and afterwards, a teacher always made sure there was at least one kid with me when I made my way home. I lived quite close to my school in primary, so my older sister and I would walk home because my parents worked. My sister is 5 years older than me, so my parents trusted her enough to leave us home alone instead of going to after-school care. One day when I was in 3rd grade, I was asked by my teacher to stay back at the end of school. I told my sister, and she said she would just go home and wait there. I should also mention that the way from home from school was pretty much along a main road, and it should have been fine. I head back to my classroom and start talking with the teacher. At this point, it was nearly 5. I'm only about halfway home when I notice the white pickup following me. I was only about 7, mind you, and you start being taught stranger danger and stuff like that, so it was still pretty fresh in my mind. The pickup gave off suspicious vibes, and the street felt empty. I remember it still being bright out, but this pickup was the only car on the road. Worse still, it wasn't even on the road. It was on the side, moving very slowly behind me. At this point, it was a red alarm in my young mind, as even then I was pretty cautious of everything. I looked back again, and this time I think whoever it was knew I was aware of them. This was bad, because I think they panicked and were driving a little quicker now to close the gap. I was also getting more panicked too. Then I remember thinking there's a path between the next houses. It leads to the back of other people's homes, and then to the street next to mine. I walk a little faster, and I guess they noticed too. I remember them speeding up a little bit, but still keeping a gap. I quickly turn down between the houses and start running as soon as I think I'm out of their sight. I hear the pickup go faster and then come to a stop. By now I've turned the corner and hid so they couldn't see me. I hear the doors swing open, and I just hoped they wouldn't follow. I hear someone step on the grass. They were following, and I was panicking. Just then a voice says that they should just leave and forget about it. They speed away, and I walk the rest of the way home. Now, you might be thinking, what made me think of this just now? Well, a while ago, I heard my parents talking about some pretty dark stuff that was shut down on the internet, out of the Gold Coast in Queensland. I step in to ask what they were talking about, and they said that when I was a kid it came out on the news that the police had taken down a huge CP website. I then went and searched this up, and turns out that the guy in charge of the website ran it out of the suburb I lived in. I got chills reading the article. Remembering back, this all happened 2 years after the van incident. 29 kids were saved from abuse that were featured on that website. It just really gives me the chills to think that maybe the guy in the pickup truck was one of them. I work night shifts at a women's shelter that is about a 30-minute commute away from my apartment. I take the metro every night to work and every morning from work. The closest metro station being situated a 5-minute walk from my apartment. My work is situated in the downtown area of the city that I currently reside in while I live in the neighborhood that has a reputation of being filled with alcoholics and drug addicts. I have had no encounters worth mentioning in either places until now. I was walking towards the metro station last night after saying goodbye to my boyfriend who was heading home after spending the evening with me. I think it's worth mentioning that my boyfriend drives to and from my place every Tuesday and Thursday, and I work from Sunday to Wednesday, meaning that I was heading to work when this happened. I was walking towards the metro station when a man suddenly appeared out of nowhere on the street corner across from the metro station and grabbed me by the arm. This happened to be on the only street corner from my apartment to the metro station that you cannot see anything on the street perpendicular to the one I was on until you got onto the street corner. So I'm getting onto the street corner. The metro station is across from me, and I am getting ready to cross the street as there was a green light when the man appeared out of nowhere and grabbed me by the arm. I freeze for a second before noticing that he is reaching over my body to grab my other arm, but before he could do that, I reacted and elbowed him in the stomach. I guess he didn't expect a quick reaction because he quickly let go. After he let go, I sprinted across the street and ran into the metro station. The metro station has 2 entrances that are parallel to one and another. Both are facing the turnstiles that access the metro downstairs. I had noticed from the corner of my eye that the guy had followed me, and before he got inside, I headed to the other exit, ran around the station, and headed back towards my apartment. Since I live in the Great White North and it had been snowing all day, I was hoping that my boyfriend had not left yet, as he would have to take the snow off his car before leaving. Luckily, he did not, and he ended up driving me to work. We also met a cop car as we were about to turn on the street to get to the highway, so we stopped and reported the guy. The cops took down my information and what I could remember of his description, and they promised to go check it out and do a few rounds around the metro station. I don't know what that guy's intentions were, but I hope I never encounter that guy ever again. This really unnerving event occurred a few weeks ago, and I have to admit, I'm still a little paranoid. As a 16-year-old girl, the 5 friends that were with me during that day are the same age and all female. We all decided to hang out at my house that day, considering we all haven't been with each other since the summer started. It was early afternoon by the time everyone had arrived. We were all having fun playing video games, chatting, and watching videos for the first few hours. A little later, as we sat through some quiet and awkward moments of boredom, one of my friends suggested we should go outside somewhere. Our first thought was to walk to a nearby grocery store, but that was immediately eliminated off the list, since it was going to be a 10 to 15 minute walk in 90-degree Fahrenheit heat. I spoke up, saying there's a small park only a few minutes away from my house. We all agreed to the idea, getting ourselves ready to head out. As I tell my mum where we're going, I lock the door behind us and start walking. We spend the last hour at the park. We're all exhausted, while at the same time not ready to leave just yet. We settle down at a picnic table and passed time chatting until one of my friends noticed a red car parked on the side of the street a little ways away from us, at the very front of the park. I didn't think anything of it at first, until she mentioned the man inside was repeatedly looking over at us. We thought it was odd, but nothing harmful. Still, we decided to leave, taking a different route home just in case. We arrived at the same street my house was on, relieved that we didn't see the same car, but anxious that it could appear again at any moment. It seemed like our suspicions were confirmed. The car then drove by us slowly, the man inside getting a closer look at us as we got a closer look at him and his vehicle. He was African American, slim, wearing a white baseball cap and muscle top, and driving a red 2003 Honda CR-V. He stopped adjacent to my house, out of all places. I was now unsure of what to do. One of my friends told me to call my parents, and I reluctantly complied. He called my dad and asked him to get us outside the house. He was slightly confused, but he agreed to do so anyway. And a few seconds later, I saw my dad on our front lawn, and we rushed over to him to tell him about the red car that was still parked near us. He ushered us inside, all while keeping an eye on the creepy man. We all sat down to take a rest, as my dad was taking pictures of the car and license plate. We were all discussing what just happened, and one of my friends apparently noticed something we did not. According to her, when the man parked his car, leaned back in his seat, he had his phone facing us through his rear window, and he was staring at us through his rear view mirror. It made me feel so sick and disgusted, wondering what that guy planned on doing with the photos and videos he took of us. We continued observing the same car that was in the same place for another 10 minutes, until my dad started pulling out of the driveway to leave for work. My dad started driving in the car's direction, and the creep booked it out of there, fearing the possible confrontation. My friends and I released a sigh of relief when we all returned to having a fun afternoon. At least now I have a picture of the car and the license plate, so I can identify it. I haven't seen the man ever since, and I hope it stays that way. I had a friend called Alicia. My town is mostly quiet. Not much happens around here, so when I'm walking around I don't feel like I'm in any danger. My town park has a section to the side which has hedges in the shape of a square, just over a meter high with some gravel. A statue and 2 benches facing each other about 10 plus meters away from each other. So because it has a statue, it's called the Memorial Park. Most dog walkers don't go in that area because a lot of people sit there and there isn't much room to throw a ball. Not to mention, there was a huge field-size area for dog walkers and anyone else to go just behind us. Me and my friend just sat on a bench talking when this old guy with a dog trailing behind him comes into the memorial area. I must mention that me and my friend were sat in that area because I, at the time, was deathly afraid of large dogs, so I had my eye on him. The second he walked in there, he starts throwing the ball for his dog to chase. Nothing too strange yet, apart from the fact he kept staring me down, and when we made eye contact, didn't look away. My friend looked over to him, then back to me, and each time the ball is thrown, it got closer and closer to me. Both the man and my friend can both see me visibly flinch and tense every time the dog runs to the ball. My friend took one last look at the man and suggested we leave. Now, there is one entrance/exit to the Memorial Park area. We didn't want to walk past him because he was stood next to the exit, so we chose to leave through the gap in the hedges in the back, which was made from so many people forcing their way through that area. The guy follows us through the gap at a distance. Seeing as it was almost time to go home, me and my friend start heading towards the town center. The guy and his dog, who was now on a lead in front of us, I clearly remember my friend taking quick looks at the guy as we walked and her saying in hurried whispers that he was staring at me. We walked through the town center and walked to the bottom of the road where me and my friend would have to part ways. We stopped to talk about what I saw out the corner of my eye, and the man's pace visibly slowed. At this point, we had been walking around 10 to 15 minutes. He walked past us slowly and looked at me in the eyes and then turned and started walking up the road. I was going to have to walk down it, and my friend insisted she would walk me home just to be safe, and because her curfew was later than mine, she was lucky in that regard and would help me out. He walked not far in front of us the whole walk to my house, his head only occasionally turning to look back at us every few minutes. Me and my friend stood on my doorstep and spoke while he walked a little further down the road. Then he turned in the direction of my house, then got out his phone and started doing something on it. I watched as my friend walked away on a different road from the man to make sure he didn't follow her. Once she was out of sight, I rushed into my house and upstairs into the bathroom. I opened the window slightly and watched the man take one last look at my house and then walk away. The scary thing is, because it was almost 3 years ago, I can't remember what his face looks like. So if I did see him again, who knows if I would recognize him. I'm just glad he hasn't come stalking my house, at least as far as I'm aware. I am the eldest of 3 brothers, and this is some number of years ago now. I was 13 while my brothers were 11 and 9 respectively. We had been down the local park to play football and kill some time before it was time to sleep. School tomorrow. Great. This was our mindset at the time, so we greatly enjoyed burning off steam, running around and screaming at each other. It always got competitive, but in a fun, brotherly kind of way. We noticed a man in the distance, looking in our general direction, and it was still light and a public park, so we didn't think anything of it. However, we did note that it was kind of strange that he just stood there in the middle of the path. No dog, no children, no friends, nothing. My youngest brother also pointed out that he was wearing a trench coat. It was hot out, so pretty weird we thought, but we skipped over it as we found it kind of funny, as you can imagine, being young and immature, and found it in some ways amusing. You know that cliche that weirdos and creepers wear these coats. We made jokes that he was completely naked under there, and that some poor soul would eventually be exposed to this man's full nudity. We soon forgot about it and continued with our game. With the sun setting, we decided it was time to go. This was around a half hour after we'd seen the man, and to be honest, we had completely forgotten about him in our competitiveness. We look up, and he's still there. He hadn't moved an inch. This creeped us out, so we walked the long way back towards town, as he was blocking the shortcut, and none of us really wanted to pass by him. He was tall, and we aren't a particularly tall family. Even at that age, we were short, and this guy was easily over 6 foot. But it was hard to tell from where we were standing. Regardless, he was too tall to risk anything. We headed home teasing each other the other way for letting that guy creep us out, even though he didn't really do anything. Accusing each other of pissing our pants and crying. It was quite funny in truth, as brotherly teasing is at that age, especially when you're all in on the joke, or the subject at least. Once we arrived at town and continued past the shops and takeaway places, my youngest brother insists we go grab something to eat. He complains he's starving and hasn't eaten since lunch. It was the same case for all of us, so we agree and head to our local takeaway. It wasn't great, but it was cheap, and being kids we didn't have much money, so it was perfect for us. A burger and some chips for £2. I can't lie, a great deal. We order, pay up, and sit down as usual waiting for food. We start talking and messing around. We didn't even look when the door chimed to let us know somebody had come into the establishment. Why would we? I'm sitting on the far right, facing nothing in particular, while my brothers are sat facing each other. They're arguing about something, and I'm sat there bored and hungry, and I began to scan the room, when I look directly to my left and my heart drops. Who do I see sat on the table opposite ours? None other than the guy from the park. The trenchcoat guy staring at us, and I mean really staring. He's closer now, so I can see him. His eyes are wide. I mean it. It looked like his eyes were going to roll out their sockets at any given moment. His facial expressions were one that made me feel uneasy. He was looking at us like he wanted to hurt us. You might think he's just hungry or having a bad day, but there's no way he chose this particular takeaway after staring at us all that time, and there was no mistaking him. My only guess is that he must have followed us. I mean, we weren't careful. We never checked behind us. Why would we? Several seconds go past and it feels like minutes. This guy is looking at me, and he just starts to angrily grind his teeth with the same mad look on his face. Honestly, he looked insane. It's at this point I look away and quietly tell my brothers that the guy from the park has followed us here, and is over there staring at us. Now my youngest brother has never been one for subtlety, and he blurts out loudly, "What, the freak from the park?" Me and my other brother look at each other, eyes wide, and then back at my youngest brother. The confused look on his face, how he didn't realize how weird this whole situation actually was. We simultaneously turn our heads and look back at the man who is now standing, eyes mad, intensely focused on my little brother. His face was bright red, and the vein in his forehead was almost bursting from his skin. We all just looked back, unsure of what to do. It was at this second that our food was ready and brought over to our table. We thanked him, and I know what you're thinking. Maybe this guy was just waiting for a meal and got annoyed when my brother referred to him as a freak. But he was already staring. But that aside, it was confirmed when the cook asked him if he was ready to take his order, and the man just shook his head. We were all starting to feel a little on edge, but figured surely the safest thing to do would be to stay inside a public place. So we started eating, and I even got a nudge from my brother. I look, and the man is now stood towering over us looking down. Without warning, he slams a handful of plastic forks from the counter onto our table. At first we try and ignore it, but he starts to breathe heavily, almost hyperventilating. Being the oldest, I feel I should say something in my sternest voice, which of course wasn't very stern at all. I told him we were fine, and thank you, and I hoped he enjoyed his meal. Kill him with kindness, I thought. Dumb idea. Without warning, he spreads all the forks frantically over the table, grabs a handful, and shoves them in his mouth and starts chewing them. I didn't have words. The noise is disgusting, and the crunching and choking. I look around to see if anyone else is seeing this, but there isn't anyone but us, and the cooks are in the back preparing the food. It's just us and this lunatic. Blood starts pouring from his mouth as he continues to churn these plastic forks, as he looks to my youngest brother and hisses. It's at this point we nope out of there and leave. We don't even take our food. Well, except my youngest brother, who I guess just wanted to leave after seeing. We didn't even take our food with us except for my youngest brother, who I guess just wanted to leave after seeing that, without even putting his plastic container down. We all quickly walk away, none of us talking. What could we say? We were speechless. But the look we gave each other was enough. Like, damn, did that really happen? Without warning, the man appeared from behind us, grabbed my youngest brother by the hand, and my blood turned to ice. I felt powerless. I felt paralyzed. He was so quiet. None of us heard him sneak up on us. We couldn't believe it. We'd looked behind us multiple times to make sure we weren't being followed. We were in shock he was there. He must have come through some side street or shortcut. Me and my brother just shot each other a panicked look, while my youngest brother struggled to set himself free. He hit him over the head with his food container, which was open, and of course did nothing. But as he pushed food into his eyes, it did give my brother and I a split second to do something, and I'll never forget it. Without thinking and without hesitation, my brother picked up a broken brick which lay in a pile next to a smashed up wall and swung it at the man's head with some force. He instantly let go but didn't fall, and we all booked it out of there. And he chased us, growling like some wild animal. He almost gained on us at one point, his long legs carrying him further with each stride. He was carrying something in his hand, but we were running and couldn't see it, not that any of us wanted to find out. Eventually we lost him in a somewhat busy part of town, and then finally made it home. We tried to tell our mum, but of course she didn't believe us. Mums never do. I know this story may seem tame to most, but it freaked us out, not least my youngest brother. Poor kid. He still hasn't been back to that takeaway. None of us have. So much for £2 meal deals. Never mind, a small price to pay. I'm just glad we did stop there that day and not head straight home. See, our mum doesn't trust us with a key, so she often leaves the front door unlocked until we arrive. If he had followed us there, and he had forced his way in, or even noticed this, it could have been much worse. I shudder to think. When I was little, I walked home from the bus stop after school. I did this every day, and I thought that my neighborhood was completely safe. Everyone there was usually very nice. Plus, the bus stop was only a block or so away from my house at the time, so it was a short distance. I hadn't realized that at the time, but a lot of people had been taken, and attempts to take people were going on in the area. The school sent out the obligatory emails and phone calls informing the parents of the situation, but it hadn't yet reached me. So one day I'm on my merry way home and notice a blue truck heading in the opposite direction. I shrug it off, as cars always passed me whenever I walked home. Though the truck turned around at the first corner it could, I thought it strange, but I tried to rationalize it. They probably forgot something. I was wrong. The truck was now going in the same direction as I was also going around the same speed I was, and this weirded me out, so I pick up the pace. I could hear the truck's engine accommodate to the speed slightly, with it picking up as well. After that, I booked it. I ran as quickly as I could to my home, and I could hear the truck's engine roar as it got faster. I somehow made it back to my house, slammed the locks on the door as quickly as possible, and was so grateful that my mum left the door unlocked that day, especially since I'd been trying to have her leave it locked so that I could use my new house key. I don't know if they were targeting me or not, but I'm glad I didn't get to find out. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed tonight's narrations. As always, I'd like to give a huge thank you to my incredible patrons who really help out by pledging a little bit every month to help support the channel, and it means a lot. If you'd like your name at the end of every video, feel free to check out Patreon and donate as little as $1 a month to keep things running over here at Mortis Media. And for awesome credits. You also get some cool prizes for signing up, and all that info can be found in the Patreon website. Again, description. So yes, being followed home is a creepy thing. Although I don't think I've ever been followed home, I know people who have. And even the tamest stories can seem incredibly uncomfortable when you're living it, as you don't know who these people are, what their intentions are, or the outcome as the seconds go by. In any case, if you liked the video, you know what to do. There'll be more stories tomorrow. But for now, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.